Cardinal Daly, and he'll actually welcome our main event on board.
Thank you, Brother Tony. Good evening, everyone. Hope you're having a good night. Yes, Brother Tony's asked me to introduce Bishop Tony, and I've got to say first off that the first relief was when Father Tony answered my email just so that he could make it tonight. That took an absolute weight off my shoulders, Bishop Tony. Some background on Bishop Tony. Well, he wasn't born too far from St Patrick's and grew up in Caulfield, and then he went to De La Salle. There's a few De La boys around, hands up. Oh, look at that. Yeah, De La boys. And they're still wearing those clown suits today on train to blue with yellow pinstripes, as they say.
Better than St Kevin's one.
Oh, yeah, St Kevin's was a shocker, wasn't it? And they couldn't play footy either. You hit them and they'd squirt. I don't know what happened there. All right, and the bishop then joined the seminary later on. He actually worked in NAB, I think, for a little while, and then took on, got the calling, and then went over to Italy to do some studies in moral theology in Italy, which is he got outstanding marks for that, and has returned to Australia, to Melbourne, where he lived most of his, all of his life really, and took on the tutor role as the chief of moral theology at the seminary. And I've then gone on to serve several parishes, his last one being St Gregory the Great in Doncaster for 12 years. Gee, they must have been good people there, Bishop. Yeah, well done there, 12 years, that's outstanding. And then last year, 12 months ago, he was promoted, shall we say, to the rank of Bishop, which is outstanding for us. So we welcome you here tonight, Bishop Tony.
So thank you very much for having me, and it is great to be with you. I am amongst some friends that I've known for many, many years, like as Michael, Maria and others that I've known, and Father Tony and others that I've known for many, many years. Brother Tony, your Brother Tony here, doesn't realise that he was the first person that I met when I moved into Noble Park. Because before I moved into Noble Park, I went down and got my hair cut. But I might have gone in disguise, you know. So whoever sent me this briefing today said, so here were the requirements. So my very efficient secretary sends out a form here to everybody about where I go and all that sort of thing, and it says, and so it's filled in. It says arrive by 6:30 for 7, so I wasn't late. Well, it says arrive at 6 for 7, and it says formal suit and tie, please. Sorry, didn't wear the tie. So I wore the bling for you. All right, so even better. Very good. So thank you, and there'll be ample parking for you in front of the restaurant. That's good. Thank you. Speak for 15 to 20 minutes. Speak about a subject of Bishop Tony's choice. Okay, that could be anything. Essendon, whatever else.
Oh, no.
Anyway, it's just interesting, just very at the moment, just as I stood up, I was asked about the Plenary Council and was I part of the Plenary Council, and we haven't heard anything about the Plenary Council. Is that what he said? No. Yeah, so, and then Father Tony and I were both at the Plenary Council, so he might prompt me if I say anything wrong. But I thought we might just talk about the Plenary Council process, which was, some of you would have been involved in it with your parishes, and some of you would have read about it, and so Father Tony and I can talk to you about it from the inside, as it were. And so you were involved. Many of you would have been involved in the consultation phases in your parishes and in your in deanery areas, etc., and part of the listening phases and then the consultation phases, etc. And then there were all the documents that went backwards and forwards, etc. And then it came down to the assemblies of the Plenary Council. Now, the first assembly of the Plenary Council, of course, happened in COVID. And so it was all an online experience, and that happened 12 months ago, and people from all around Australia were involved in it, and it was nothing like the, in some ways, nothing like the face-to-face experience that we had in Sydney for the second assembly. And so I just want to really talk about the second assembly, because that's the one that's most fresh, and out of which came the decrees of the plenary council. So the first thing to note about it was that the plenary council gathered people from all around Australia. I can remember just seeing these people from right across the country, from the furthest in the north to the bottom of the west, to Tassie and all around. That was just extraordinary. Bishop Jerry Holohan is the Bishop of Bunbury, and I had a conversation with him one day over breakfast, and he said, "You guys in the East know nothing about us," and he also said, "Well, and we know nothing about you either." So it just was this meeting of the whole of the Church of Australia. I'll give you one little example. On the table that I sat on, these were the people that were on the table. Father Trevor Trotter, who's the provincial superior or regional superior for Australia and Asia of the Columbans, the head honcho of the Sisters of Mercy for Australia and Asia, a lawyer who works for the Sisters, who works for Mercy Health, the chair of Mercy Health, a lady from Wagga who's the national president of Catholic Women's League, the Bishop of Wagga, Bishop Mark Edwards, the parish priest of Alice Springs, a layman who's a parishioner from the parish of Humpty Doo in the Diocese of Darwin. So these were the sort of people, so as I say, the whole flavour of the whole Church of Australia, people, you know, wherever Humpty Doo is, that type of thing, that the whole was even encapsulated on the little table that I was on. And there was something like 41 tables, is that right, Tony? Of people like that gathered around from all around Australia who were participants in the Plenary Council. The second thing to note, it was a very prayerful experience in some regards. Every day began with prayer. Every day began with prayer, and quite a substantial amount of prayer. And that prayer was put on live stream for people who could see it. And it began with an acknowledgement of country, so a particular flavour with the Aboriginal people from the north, in the Northern Territory and the Torres Strait, and of course people also from the Aboriginal communities in northern Queensland, in South Australia, in the outback of the New South Wales as well, were particularly represented, and of course the people in the northwest from the Diocese of Broome. One lady from the Diocese of Broome was most up front. She got the microphone one day and she stood up there, and they haven't got a bishop up there at the moment, and the Apostolic Nuncio was up on the stage. He and the Cardinal from New Zealand and the Cardinal from Malaysia. They were observers, and so they were up on a stage and they were just watching everything. And this lady, who was an Aboriginal lady, she stood up and she said, "Nuncio, we want a bishop," because they've got an administrator from the Bishop of Geraldton goes up there every so often, and she said, "We don't want a FIFO bishop, we want a real bishop, we want our own." So they knew what they wanted, so that was really quite powerful and strong. So, as I say, the whole thing began in the context of prayer each day. That was a wonderful, wonderful experience, and also that acknowledgement of country, and the acknowledgement of the different places that people came from. Each day except the last day also ended in prayer, also except the second penultimate day, because the Mass was in the morning, but they ended with Mass each day in St Mary's Cathedral, which was also the site of all of the other plenary councils that have happened in Australia. So we began with prayer in the morning in the Assembly place, and we ended each day in the Cathedral of St Mary's in Sydney in prayer. And that prayer that ended each day also had different flavours. So, for example, each of the major archbishops were the celebrants, except on one day it was Bishop Bichok, who's the Ukrainian bishop in Australia, who lives here in Melbourne, in North Melbourne. The Ukrainian cathedral for the whole of Australia is in North Melbourne, just behind Arden Street. And Nicole Bichok was the celebrant one day, and we had the liturgy was in the Ukrainian rite in St Mary's Cathedral, in the Catholic Cathedral, which is quite extraordinary for that to happen, because the whole cathedral is established in a different way. But so, and again, of course, the prayer and our focus was on the war in Ukraine. And Mikol said that Mass that day, and he was flying to a synod of the bishops of the Ukraine the next day, so our prayers went with him. And then Bishop Michael McKenna led the prayer another day, and the focus of that day's prayer was Christian unity. And then the Archbishop of Sydney, Anthony Fisher, he led the votive Mass for Our Lady, and we asked Our Lady to intercede for us in the process of the Plenary Council. And at the very beginning was the Mass of the Holy Spirit on the first day, on the Sunday, and that Mass of the Holy Spirit was led for us by the Apostolic Nuncio, Archbishop Charles Bulbul, who is the Nuncio to Australia. And the preacher, so that was the Mass of the Holy Spirit, and the preacher was Bishop Columba Macbeth Green, who's the Bishop of Wilcannia Falls, which is an out-of-the-way diocese in the back of New South Wales, which is the size of France geographically, and has more kangaroos than people, and all of that sort of thing. On the very last night, we had a dinner, a celebratory dinner at the end of our work, and people were asked, what's the highlight of what you did? And they passed one around one of these microphones, yeah? And they put it in front of Bishop Columba, and they said, what was the highlight of your week here? And he said, the homily on the first day, which he had given. And in some ways, his homily was a highlight, because the readings were the readings of the ordinary Sunday of that day, and the readings. The first reading talked about the people of Israel wandering in Exodus, and Bishop Columba was able to talk about that and use that to reflect upon us as the Church in Australia, and to say, perhaps we are the people who've been wandering in the desert. Perhaps we have been like the people of the Exodus, who've been murmuring, asking God, where are you? Perhaps we have had the anger and thinking, we're lost. Some voices haven't been heard that have been wanted to be heard. And he applied it to our Australian church and the different voices of people who want to be heard. And he also applied it to the people who are wounded. And he applied it to the Aboriginal community too, the people who felt that they've got they're like the people of the Exodus, that they've been distanced from their land. And all of those came up as topics during the Plenary Council. So let me suggest to you that the Plenary Council discussions were a journey in the bark of Peter. You know what I mean by bark? B-A-R-Q-U-E, the boat of Peter. The church has always been called the bark of Peter, yeah? So the bark of Peter in Australia has been on rocky waters, shall we say? Stormy times in recent times. Some people have jumped ship. Some people have looked for captains. Some people, the winds have blown in our faces, and the headwinds have knocked us around. So what did we address in the Plenary Council? We addressed some of the things about who's in the boat, who's in the bark of Peter in the church in Australia, who's going to guide this boat, who are going to be the engines, who do we have to get into the boat, and where do we have to go? So let me suggest to you a couple of things of how the Plenary Council unfolded. So clearly the very first decisions that were made by the Plenary Council, the first lot of voting were on the native Australian people, the people of the Aboriginals and Torres Strait Islanders and the native people of Australia, and how they were cared for, and how they would be incorporated into the boat. So the first lot of motions, and they were passed with flying colours, shall we say. And the people, you could see the relief on the people from Darwin and Alice Springs and the Northern Territory as these motions were passed, and these motions talked about how we bring these people in, how we make apologies for the way their children may have been treated in our care in our schools when they were little, you know, how their traditions can be brought into our liturgy, how they can feel at home at the altar of God, how they can feel at home at the altar of God, and how our biblical story, our story of the Lord Jesus, can be incorporated into their traditional stories without diminishing the truth of our story and our faith. Yeah. So that was the first set of motions about how do we bring the Aboriginal people into the boat of Peter, and how does the boat of Peter go to meet those of the Torres Strait? Yeah. Is that okay? So that's the first of them. The second, of course, was the really big one, and that, of course, is the people who've suffered at the hands of clergy who have not lived up to the standard of what we would expect clergy to look up to be, you know, who have been abusers of particularly of children, and also those of us who wear the bling, who hadn't responded with the heart of the Good Shepherd to the pleas of those who had been victims, yeah? And rather turned away or pushed away or whatever else. So the second, how do we, if people feel that they're excluded from the bark of Peter, the ship of Peter, because of the behaviour of clergy or because of the response of those who've been religious superiors, well, they won't hear the message of Jesus if they don't feel respected. If they've been wounded, well, that will block their ears from hearing the good news. If they've been traumatised, they will not be able to receive the love of God, because the love of God has been from people who should have been people who are trusted. There's a complete block, and you can talk about the love of God until you're blue in the face, because the trauma and the distrust that's been created is a complete anathema to them joining the bark of Peter. So the next steps were about how we bring about healing, how we say sorry, how we give just recompense, how those in leadership will respond into the future, and how we make the bark of Peter, the ship of Peter, the church, a safe place for all of us to be. Because when it is a safe place, and when people are respected, then they can come, and then they can be loved, and then they can be healed, and then they can know the love of the Lord Jesus. Because the love of the Lord Jesus must have a human face, because we cannot see the Lord face to face until the day we are in Springboard. Yeah. So that was the second one. Then there was one. There were items about how the bark of Peter travels alongside other barks, other ships, and they would be the ones who are the people of other faiths, Christian unity. Yeah. So whether they be the Greek Orthodox who share our faith, except for the primacy of Peter. Whether they be other Christians of the Protestant denominations, etc. So that was another one. Then there was a big furore. There was a big furore on the third day. I left out something that I wanted to say before that, but there was a big furore on the third day, and of course the big furore on the third day was about the place of women in the church and the recognition of them. And this particular furore, depending on where you've read, has been presented in all sorts of different ways. So one particular person who likes to write in every place under the sun wrote this thing, bishops vote down women type thing, okay, etc. That's not exactly how it happened. We can witness to that. But there were two motions about the inclusion of women in the church, about their place in the church, about how they might have roles of leadership, if they are employed, how they might have proper salaries for that, and if they and what education and preparation for mission, etc. All those sorts of things. Okay. So these two motions, on one of them, it passed the consultative vote. Now the consultative vote. So if we were here now, there's one person here, that's me, would have got a deliberative vote. The rest of you would have all had consultative votes. Yeah. Consultative votes were like 5 times the number of the bishops. Yeah, is that right? 5 times? Yeah. So 5 times. And so anyway, so one of those motions on the women did not pass the consultative vote. And the second one did pass that. And by technicalities, I'll get my pages so that I get it absolutely right. So on the consultative vote, and the topic was witnessing to the equal dignity of men and women, and the consultative vote on the first motion received 148 pleased votes, 36 no votes, and pleased but they wanted an amendment, 27 from the consultative. And the second, on the consultative, that each diocese and eparchy foster new opportunities for women to participate, it received from the consultative vote 84 votes pleased, 31 pleased but they want amendments, and 97 not pleased. So it didn't pass, yeah? From the ordinary, I shouldn't say the ordinary people, but all the people besides the bishops there, yeah? And then the next day, the bishops had to vote on those. And the bishops, on that one that didn't pass, 27 of them voted in favour, budget, pleased, 5 pleased with an amendment, and 11 not pleased. So the bishops didn't vote it down, but what they didn't get was enough to get a 2/3 majority to get it through, you see? That's what was required. Okay, now let me tell you what happened. So there was a little bit of a furore. A little bit. He's smiling. A little bit of a furore, a little bit of upset that these 2 votes on the inclusion of women in the bark of Peter, the ship of Peter, didn't just sail through. And it was a missed opportunity in some regard. But out of it came some good. And here might be the voice of the Holy Spirit in it all. The whole thing had to slow down. The whole thing had to slow down. There were meetings at lunchtime, the bishops all met at lunchtime, and the bishops decided during that lunchtime meeting that they would surrender the ability to vote saying pleased with amendments, so that they either had to be, own up and say pleased or not pleased. That was one thing. Number 2, the whole process, we had been presented with all of these motions and we could only say pleased with amendments or not pleased. But then after that, the whole process slowed down and the people were given the opportunity to consult on line by line by line by line of everything that was being discussed at the Plenary Council. So instead of just, being presented with here's the motion and you have to accept it all, everybody, all 200 and something people, sorry?
277.
To all 277 people were able to put their input into every motion that was subsequently passed by the Plenary Council. More than that, what happened then, because it would have been a disaster if the Plenary Council had not passed a motion including women in the ship of Peter in the Church in Australia, the Plenary Council, it had it within its constitutions that you could revisit something that had already been discussed if you got 75% of the members approving a revisitation. It almost got 100% of the members saying, let's look at this again. And they sent the original motions back to the drafting committee and they said, come up with something that we can all, given that the people had already said we're not happy, and given that the bishops had said, well, some of them had said we're not happy, it needs amendments. So the drafting committee came up with motions and then they were put to the whole body. And people, everyone, say you'd all been sitting there, everyone was allowed to have a say if they wanted to have a say. And everyone was allowed to input. And so the motions that were passed turned out to be better. And if I flick to my last page, the motions that were passed on the inclusion of women in the church, when I said to you that they didn't pass first time round, the second time round, they went from 2 motions to 4, and the first one had 192 approve, 7 still wanted amendments. Well, they weren't allowed any more after that, and only 7 didn't approve of the people who were in the thing. Of the bishops, 43 out of 44 pleased, 1 not. There's some people who can't please anyway. Similarly, second motion of the inclusion of women in the church, where we committed to formal policies and intentional practice and experience including the perspectives of women in ministry, and that they be heard and valued at local, diocesan and national levels. Of the people on the floor, 188 pleased, 8 wanted further amendment, 9 not pleased. The motion passed. The bishops, 43 pleased, 1 not pleased. Similarly, the third motion, that each diocese commits to supporting, with appropriate formation recognition, new opportunities for women to participate in ministries that engage with the most important aspects of diocesan parish life. 183 pleased, 9 with amendments, 17 not pleased from the bishops, 43 pleased, 1 not pleased. And the last, that the Plenary Council commits the Church in Australia to implementing more fully the undertakings of a document that was written many, many years ago called Woman and Man, the Bishop's Response 2000, and Woman and Man, One in Christ, 1999. The bishops voted 38, 3 and 3. So what I'm going to say to you is that in all of that, the Plenary Council had a process that was able to include and deal with what was problematic. And the voice of the Holy Spirit helped us move along. And subsequently, every other motion that was put to the Plenary Council, everyone got a say. So that was the Church at work, and that was the Holy Spirit at work. That everyone was able to say something. Anyone who wanted to could input. So now we've got the Aboriginals into the bark of Peter. We've got the women into the bark of Peter. We've got the ecumenical dialogue with the other ships that run along to the course of the beatific vision where we meet the Lord Jesus. The other major issues were education. So the place of Catholic education. The other major issues. So in other words, what are going to be the motors in the life of the Church in Australia? So our education, social services, our healthcare, all of those things were dealt with as well. So what's going to drive the bark of Peter? Yeah. Our liturgy, how we pray, how we worship, how we engage with the world. All of these were dealt with by the Plenary Council. In other words, what's going to drive what's going to be the engine room of the bark of Peter? Or what's going to be the wind in our sails? Well, the wind in our sails is going to be the Holy Spirit, yeah? Then lastly, or I shouldn't say lastly, but then the next one is going to be, the next questions were, who's going to have their hands on the steering wheel? You know, who's going to have their hand on the rudder? So, in other words, who's going to exercise governance? And one of the things that was quite clearly discussed at the Plenary Council was that we as a church are going to be. There's only 4 clergy in this room. There's the look of the rest of you. So the Plenary Council very clearly stated that the tiller must be shared. The steering wheel must be shared. There might be a map, or there might be a sextant that a captain might have to hold. You know, for us, Pope Francis at the moment. But the other roles, there needs to be a captain, a captain's mate. And every colonel needs a major. Every admiral needs commodores. So the Plenary Council talked about the participation of all of us, and those motions were all voted.
So the authority of the Church has been diminished. We've become like the Anglicans, ruled by synods of men and women. The Pope as the head of the Church is no longer.
I didn't say that.
Sounds like it to me.
You know, I thought I just said the Pope is in charge.
Yeah.
The Pope holds the sextant.
It's a synodal church.
Yep.
The Pope is in charge.
The Pope is in charge. So anyway, so those are the things. The bark of Peter
We do have the Pope in charge. We do have the bishops, but we also have the participation of the people of God. So that was the mission of the Plenary Council. At the moment, as we answered before, all is quiet. All is quiet. Why? Because the decrees of the Plenary Council first have been passed by the Plenary Council. They will go to the Bishops' Conference in November for discussion. Then they will be sent to Rome, and again Rome will look at them, and if Rome approves the decrees of the Plenary Council, and only if, then they will come back to us, and then it will be the job of the Australian Church to implement what is approved by Rome, and only what is approved by Rome. So that might help you too, Michael, it will only be when Rome gives its ratification but the purpose of the Plenary Council was to say, how does the bark of Peter, how does the ship of Peter here in Australia sail towards its destiny? And its destiny is the face of Christ. And who do we include in it? And who do we include in the bark of Peter? And how do we include them and make people welcome in it? And how do we bring healing where there has been wounds? And how do we how do we share the mission so as to bring us home to our shore, which is the Lord Jesus? Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you, Bishop Tony Island. I just remember why I didn't acknowledge you, the fact that you came into the shop. You're an Essendon supporter. I had it with a passion. We've got time for a few questions to Bishop Tony.
I hate him with a passion.
Are there any questions?
Look, can I ask another one? You know, all this moving the furniture around. The Catholic Church is in deep trouble. We've got a few priests. You know, a few years ago when Brendan was in charge of the seminary, there were about, I think, 60. Now there are about 14 students. But worst of all, we're losing people in our congregations. This new idea called the Way of the Gospel, going to put one priest in charge of about 6 parishes. The reason is because those parishes, many of the parishes are becoming less and less viable. Isn't the real problem not the furniture and the structure, but the fact that we've got to renew the faith at the level of the heart? How can we get people really on fire with belief rather than these silly discussions about who's the boss and who isn't?
Thank you, Father. Did you want, Bishop, would you like to respond?
Take that as a comment.
Yes, I think that I was almost going to say take that as a comment, and I would agree with you. I agree with you, and that's where I said to you, the heart of the Plenary Council had to be prayer and openness to the Holy Spirit.
Bishop, I've got a question about education.
Sure.
Where that's heading. Particularly in regards to sacraments.
Yes.
Because of the change of our schools are treated, we don't even know if the people that are delivering religious education in our primary schools are actually Catholic, because we don't have a right to ask under the current laws. So we have this feeling and fear too, and particularly in regards to sacraments, that the parents, the families, the ones that are obviously going to save the faith, we have to get them up and about, and we'll save the faith. But it just seems to us we don't have enough of a handle on it. Our priest only has appointment only consultation with the school, and we're frightened that the kids are missing a lot of their classes in regards to all the sacraments and are not prepared enough to receive them, and in the end it's becoming a tokenism, and it can only be handled by the parish people. It can't be handled by the PP, because obviously they come and go, whereas the parishioners stay there most of their lives, and a way to that we can actually get a handle on that to ensure that the faith is correctly delivered, particularly in regards to the sacraments. You have had much feedback yourself about that?
So in his introduction before, someone said that I've been parish priest of St Gregory's Doncaster for 12 years. And each person's going to do it differently, okay? But here are some of the things that we did, and you might find them helpful, you might not. But all I can speak from is from my experience, if you don't mind. So number one, over those 12 years I had two different principals, one who'd been a very experienced principal, and then another one who comes from around your area, who's actually very committed to the faith, who goes to church every Sunday, and that's why she got the job, even though she was younger. Yeah. So she's very committed to it, and that was the number one criteria of all the members of the panel. And if we had that panel, no matter what the governance of the school was, she would get the job. Okay, so one of the things that would be in the selection of principals, deputy principals and religious education leaders would be to ensure that the selection panel are made up of people like yourself who will ask that very question, because that's what happened when the lady who's currently principal of St Gregory's was there. All of the people around the selection panel were people who wanted someone of faith to be the leader of that school. And similarly, the deputy principal is a person of faith, and the religious education leader is absolutely committed to her parish out in resident. Okay, so you see, when you've got those three key roles, at least, of people who are committed to the faith, then you've got that. Then when you've got that leadership in, they work hand in glove with the parish priest. There's no barriers. You know, there was never any distance between. You know, and one of the things that we used to say was that it had to be seamless between the parish priest and the principal and the REL. And when that's the case, then the kids know that it's seamless, parents know it's seamless, and you're presenting a unified face, and you're presenting the common mission. Then that leads you into tactics. So we all know that, and I know this because I was in 3 schools today, so we all know that kids are playing football and soccer, and mum's being the taxi driver on Saturday, Sunday, whatever else, yes, etc. Okay. So what did we do? Well, we thought, my father's now long dead, so I can quote him, but he used to say to me, "You can't fart against thunder." So what did we do? We put on the class masses, not on Sunday morning, but we put on the class masses at 5 o'clock on Sunday evenings. All our First Communion masses were on Sunday evenings or Saturday evenings, so that so it was when the people could come, and that way you invite them into the story, you know, and then so you start to think, all right, I can't. They're not going to come because they're playing footy at Doncaster Junior Football Club on Sunday morning. So, all right, so we put the class masses on Saturday night, or we put them on Sunday evening, and then so you use that. So those are my two principal things. Is one is that your selection of leadership. So you along with your parish priest, you make sure that the people who are selecting those leaders that you're asking the question. So some people, if they were in the southern area, would have heard me say this the other day, because I quoted Bishop Greg Bennett. So I was in the sacristy at Aspendale a few weeks ago for a funeral of Paul Belton. So Paul Belton's mum, the priests here will know Paul Belton. And so Marie Belton's funeral, and long-time parishioner at Aspendale. Her husband Tom has been a long time. They've been long-time parishioners there, and Tom was the bursar at St Bede's College, etc., and all those sorts of things for years. Anyway, so that's why I went to the funeral, and Bishop Greg Bennett was there, and some priests from Sale came to celebrate, because Paul is now himself the business manager of the Catholic station in Sale. But one of the priests from Sale asked this question of Bishop Greg, and said he's about to employ a principal. And he said, but it's no longer it's no longer the parish primary school. It's run by Docile, which is what they call it down in Sale. We call it Max, yeah? So he said, it's no longer our school. Bishop Greg turned and said to him, yes, it is still your parish school. It's still your parish school, and you've got to claim it as your parish school. Yeah? It's still your parish school. You know, all of our parishioners...
We have no authority in the school. Yes. It's been taken away from us. That's the fact.
Max operate the school for you, or Docile operates the school for you. But the parish priest, like Father Tony here, he is still, and Father Andrew, they are the custodians of mission in the school. They are on the employment of the principal. They are on the employment of the REL and the deputy principal. They are supposed to. The guidelines say that they are supposed to meet with the principal every week or regularly. So, you know, if you're meeting with them regularly, you've got that. So whilst they might take away the business stuff from us, we've still got to. And so Bishop Greg said to the parish priest the other day, so as you're employing that person and you're on that panel, you've got to be the person that may ask the question of the referees. Does he or she go to church? Are they active in their parish? Are they a person that we would want to put in front of our community? Yeah, so that's the responsibility of the priest, to be able to make sure that our school does maintain its Catholic identity. Is that a fair comment, Tony?
It is, yeah, exactly what happened. The custodians are directors of mission.
Yep.
And
Okay, thank you, Bishop.
Thank you very much. Put your hands together for Bishop. Bishop Daly, a little thank you.
Thank you.
It's a little bit of the Holy Spirit. Okay, dessert?
Yes.
Yes, dessert. Thank you very much. Dessert's going to be served right now.
Thank you.